Everyone worries about getting the next job or the next promotion. You should worry about how to do the next job before you get the job. That was the best piece of career advice I ever got. When you get the next job, people don't realize the clock starts right then and there, right? At that point, you own the past, the present, and the future.
This is a series where we're looking at exploring the strategies and the mindsets of elite athletes and executive professionals to try to draw parallels between them and see what we can learn from each discipline. You know, we want to drive people to excellence both on the field, in the boardroom, or whatever your specialism is. You know, you've had a fantastic career across General Motors and Cadillac, and I think you've done plus over 18 years with PepsiCo. You've been a leader in many different divisions. You've traveled from Shanghai to New York now. I think you started in Detroit, went to Dallas. That's, to an outsider, a very successful career and a very exciting career. What would you say is your proudest achievement throughout that, or in life?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. If I were to reflect back, after many years of going through this career, I came up with a purpose statement, right? What motivates me? For me, what motivates me is I aspire to learn, solve complex problems, transform a business, inspire talent through authentic leadership, leave a legacy. So there are a couple of instances in my career when I checked all those boxes, but not every year. So I think for me, an achievement is when all of those things line up and you have an opportunity to actually leave a legacy and an impact. So I think that's kind of how I would look at it. Yeah, so I've had a couple of moments like that.
Any specific one?
I would say, the assignment in Asia Pacific when I was based out of Shanghai, was a fantastic opportunity because by the time we got done as a team, it was a complex problem because the growth had moved from a portion of China, which was east and south, to much more central and west. And you had to figure out, how do you redo the go-to-market? How do you redo the manufacturing footprint? What is your ambition? Because we had to reset our ambition, because initially we were like, oh, we're growing as fast as a multinational. Well, are you growing as fast as a local Chinese manufacturer? And then talent. Historically, we've been very much expat managed talent force. By the time we left, it was managed by the local talent. So, and then you think about the legacy and impact. You have amazing talent who are running that portion of the business. The business has accelerated, and it's done so after 5-8 years since I've left. So I think that to me checks out all the boxes that I talked about.
It's very impressive.
So yeah, so I had a couple of instances of having done that.
And when was the first time you actually personally considered yourself a success, whether that's education or professional or home, or whatever it is?
I don't know. Success, it's kind of an interesting word. I personally have, I got a healthy amount of discontent. I don't think I look back on past achievements and reflect on it too much. I think for me, what motivates me is, hey, it's about the kind of the next challenge, the next learning. Maybe one of these days I'll call it a day and retire and reflect, but I don't know. In fact, I would say I'm still trying to get better every day. So I don't know whether I would say there's one thing I've said. Yeah.
Do you think people should celebrate the success more? Do you think people should take those moments?
I do get advice from my wife especially to say that you need to. I don't know. I personally feel if you do that, I just feel your motivation changes, right? I don't know whether you're hungry enough, whether you think you've achieved the peak of what you're trying to do. So personally, it worries me when you spend too much time celebrating kind of your achievements, or rather look forward. And in fact, if you think about the definition of achievement, it's always interesting. definition of achievement is you've completed a task. And when you completed a task, basically you get the freedom to kind of move on to the next step and you start the next task. That's kind of how, at least I've looked at it.
Yeah,
So,
fair. No, it's fair enough. Everyone's got their own definition and their own views. So it's interesting to hear. And when you are trying to achieve your goals and reach those benchmarks, what are your key non-negotiable behaviors that you adopt, that you take into those tasks?
I think maybe a couple of things that have served me well. One, being in the moment, right? Which is easy thing to be said, but done. Meaning, for example, I don't multitask. When I'm in a meeting, even if it's like I just finished a whole day of meetings, I don't multitask. I'm in the moment. When I'm in a conversation, I'm not thinking about the next thing I'm going to do. I'm talking to the person, listening. So I think that is probably one. The second thing is consistency. Is this notion of, it's tough. Like as executives, you go through a bunch of meetings throughout the day. How consistent are you in all of those meetings? I'm one of those people who have trained myself that every time there's a meeting and there's a pre-read, I've actually gone through it, formed a hypothesis, I come in for an engaged dialogue. To do that consistently every single meeting, I think that's important. And also consistently on how you interact with people, just to make sure, because for them, that might be the only interaction they have with you for the whole year. It's how you're consistent. Third is authenticity, right? Like, I think really being true to yourself on who you are as a leader, and that's how you deal with people. And I think people appreciate that. Like, how are you an authentic leader?
And do you have any habits or rituals or anchors, I think a lot of people refer to them of, that keep you going and keep that consistency, or that help you keep those non-negotiable behaviors flowing?
Yeah. No, a couple of them. And I mean, these are all things that you develop over the years, right? I don't think I started my career with these 3 or 4 things.
But if someone could start their career with those, it could skip them ahead 10 years or something. Yeah.
Well, first is making sure you're intentional about how you use your time. I think that's probably the biggest advice I would give people when they're starting off their career. I, for an example, color code my time management, right? So I have 4 or 5 buckets about how I manage time. Every other month, we audit and see how am I spending my time, and do I need to course correct? So it's a very intentional thing, because I remember reading, I think this average human lifespan is 4,000 weeks. So and I think since then I've been super intentional about how I manage time. So I think that's one. Second is, how are you deliberate about learning? It's one of those things that always falls to the wayside, right? You're busy, life gets to you, but very deliberate. Like I usually by Christmas time, I plan on there are a couple of topics I'm going to learn about the next year. And again, I would qualify that this is not surface learning, because you're on a device, you get used to exposed to so many different topics. It's kind of deep learning. Like I picked these 2 topics and I'm doing that for a stretch of 12 weeks, and that's all I'm doing. So I think being intentional about learning. Third is reflection. I think one of at least by nature, I'm an introvert. So I write. It helps me do 2 things. One, when I write, I reflect. 2, it also makes me intentional about learning, because I'm usually researching about a topic when I write. So I think that helps. So I think those would be, maybe the last one is this notion of after action review, which is like, hey, you did something, did it work, not work? Because sometimes you go on to the next thing without being deliberate about what didn't work. I think it came from the US Army, and that served me well, is doing a teardown of what worked, what didn't work, what are we going to do different? So maybe those would be the ones.
The time is a fascinating one, because when you break it down, like you said, into a lifespan, it starts getting a little probably scary. Can you tell us what your color codes are?
Yeah, no, happy to. So I have 5 buckets. One is, basically running the business, which is delivering day-to-day results. Like the second is people and culture, right? How much time am I spending in that? Third is long-term strategy, right? And that's kind of the business side of it. Fourth is learning. As I said, you got to be deliberate about it. And fifth, which is something it's come with age and maturity, is relationship. Right? Really investing, whether it's friends or family, being purposeful, because you don't prioritize that gets away. You wake up. So those would be kind of the 5 buckets that I color code, and there's a pie chart that I look at. I'm an engineer by trade, and then I audit and we course correct.
That's really interesting. And is it even split, or do you aim for an even split?
No, because it depends on the kind of the life stage of that particular business cycle or your personal life stage. I don't think you're going to get to a perfect 20%. I think what you want to be is aware of, oh, I didn't realize the last couple of months is how I spent my time. Do I need to course correct? So it's more about, by the end of the year, how do you hopefully get to a healthy balance versus, hey, in a given period of time, you're trying to split it up even, right? It depends on the business rhythm, and everything else going on.
Now, I'm sure, throughout your career, you've been, you worked in many places, worn many hats. Have you ever had a mentor specifically that has helped you, or that you've looked up to and taken advice from?
Totally. Yeah. I personally believe what drives one's success is having mentors throughout their career. I have been incredibly blessed to have had mentors, I think almost through my entire, all the different stages of career. And by the way, this is one learning I would share. I remember when I first got started, I used to think, well, mentors are when you're initially learning and growing your career. I would actually argue you actually need more mentors the higher up you go up in the organization, because mentors provide you with perspective. Because you always find the higher you're on the top, the bad news travels fast and you're the last person to get to know. So you want to have perspective coming from wisdom of people who have been there, done that. Everyone likes to think, I'm the first one doing a certain task. And truth is that many people before you have done it. And there's so much you can learn, getting their perspective, and also sharing kind of how you're thinking about solving a problem and how they would approach it. So no, for a fact, personally, I think I'm here today because of some amazing mentors I've had throughout my career.
I'm sure you've had a lot of great advice, but can you think of the best advice or advice that has really stood out to you that you still keep with you to this day?
I think the best advice I ever got was, I remember someone saying, everyone worries about getting the next job or the next promotion. You should worry about how to do the next job before you get the job. That was the best piece of career advice I ever got. Because for me, it's interesting, when you get the next job, people don't realize the clock starts right then and there, right? At that point, you own the past, the present, and the future. You're not like, the other guy did this, the other person did this, right? So I think, and imagine, and if you actually are a little more deliberate thinking about that next role, how you would do it, learning from people who are doing it now, what do they do well, what do they not do well? It's such an incredible opportunity, and you just don't have the time to reflect when you're in the role. So I thought that was probably the best, and also that was the best piece of advice for me, because one thing I think it reframed how I approach roles. I approach roles as, this is my last job. This is my last job at the company, all right? It's not about using this job to get to the next job. It is about this job and what am I going to do there.
That's good advice.
So, yeah.
And in terms of leadership, what do you consider the most successful traits of good leaders? Either leaders that you've worked with or traits that you try to project yourself. What are the most successful ones for leadership, do you think?
I would tell you 2 things, right? I've learned one, personally I would say it's self-awareness and humility gives you the right to lead people. And they're both equally important. Self-awareness, really being aware of what is your strength, and more importantly, what's your opportunity. How are you going to complement that with team members who could bring their strengths to it? and also being self-aware about what your perception of self is and how do people perceive you. Sometimes there's a gap, right? So I think this self-awareness is a big area. And the other thing is this humility. I mean, it's such an understated thing, but the fact of the matter is when you're humble, you listen, you learn, you reflect, and then you act. And I think those two things are probably, in all of the best leaders I've seen, variations of those two qualities, and that's something I aspire for.
And has anyone's career particularly inspired you in your own journey, not necessarily just within Pepsi, but in the wider industry, or someone outside of your industry perhaps that you've looked at who thought, that's the kind of executive or the kind of leader that I want to be?
Well, first, I've been incredibly blessed with growing up here in PepsiCo. We had it's known as an academic leadership company, and we've, created amazing leaders. I personally don't look at somebody's career and say, hey, that's something I want to emulate. I personally look for, hey, are there qualities or impact this person has driven that I can aspire, that I aspire for? And this could be impact within the context of, the company that they work at, but it could be impact within the broader ecosystem of an industry, or just personal impact on causes of things. So I don't know whether I always, because the other thing you'll find managing a career, and I think we started talking about this when you made a reference to one of my friends. You can plan everything you can, right? But the career, there's a lot of things that happens by chance. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure you can say, hey, that's a career I want to emulate, right? So I would rather focus on what is it about that particular person that left a legacy and impact that I would want to emulate.
You don't get as high as you've done and been as successful as you've been without making mistakes. And that's something that everyone has to deal with, regardless of their rank or how long they've been doing their job. Yeah. How do you deal with mistakes? Because it's something, as I say, it happens to everyone. How do you deal with them? How do you move past them?
As you said, Massimo, I think for you to learn and grow, you do need to make some mistakes. And also one of the things I'm a big believer, especially when you're trying to make transformative moves, is to experiment. And by definition, you're going to make mistakes when you experiment. One of the things I've learned at least, is being what I call this notion of purposeful experimentation. Meaning I have a clear objective. If the experiment is a success, I know how to scale it. If it were to fail, I know exactly how I'm going to apply it. So I think that's one notion. The second thing I think I talked about before, which is this notion of after-action review, which is like, hey, it didn't work. Why did it not work? What is it that I can learn from that we would apply the next time around? Outside of that, I think on the mistake, the biggest thing is, one is obviously being self-critical and being objective about judging the mistake you made, but then also being incredibly generous and empathetic with the team. Because that's the part that you have to balance, because if you don't reflect those qualities, then they're never going to experiment. They're going to just do what was done before, and hence will never transform. So it's one of those things that you have to balance out.
And what do you feel matters way less than you thought it would? So when you were a younger man, what do you know now that matters way less than you anticipated it would?
I would tell you job titles matter less. At the end of the day, you rent it for a while. They don't drive who you are as a person or your identity. I think that's probably, again, one of those learnings which comes with age and maturity.
Also easy for a CEO to say, like, oh, don't worry about it, guys. No, but it's fair. It's fair. Yeah. And this is more of a philosophical one, but what one change could you make today that would have the most positive impact on your life going forward, either personally or professionally?
it's interesting. In most cases, I find your towering strength is always an area of opportunity, right? We all lean into it, right? For me, I think you mentioned it before, pausing to celebrate, enjoying the moment, I think would probably make me more of a contented person. And I think it also would reflect on other team members. I think for sure, I think that's something I need to work on. Second could be this ratio that I talked about with time management. As much as I try to balance that, some years or not, it gets out of whack. And I wish I could be even more purposeful in managing that ratio, right? So those would probably be
good changes to make.
Yeah.
And they would definitely be positive. Well, maybe, hopefully.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ram, I think that's it. Thanks
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.